program is part of the Scene Projects podcast network. The Scene Project features interviews with independent musicians, comedians, and artists from across the Midwest. Become part of our community and support local art wherever you are. Welcome into another exciting episode of The Scene. I am your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today is recording and performing artist, HAAWWS. Brother, welcome to the show.
Peace. How are you, Bubba? How are you?
Man, I'm doing well this morning. We were wasting good content in the pre-pro, so it was time to hit that record button and to get into it. But before we get into all the things that you're doing now and some of these awesome initiatives that you're part of out there in Boston, I wanted to give you the floor for a minute here and just give us a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, man. I was rapper, entrepreneur, started here in Roxbury. And just a kid who kind of, figured out like how to turn his rap into a business, avoiding, the stereotypical pressures of growing up in an urban community. The area that kind of raised me and kind of helped me become the person I am today is Grove Hall, like very prominent in a lot of my art and the way that I kind of, express and present my music. It's like a big theme for me. But, overall, just a Roxbury kid, navigating the inner city, figuring out life, figuring out what I want to do, finding a passion in music and kind of just putting words together and creating songs and presenting art to people and bringing visuals to life. And I kind of just poured over and snowballed into a whole bunch of other stuff. But, that's kind of like got us to this point today. So it's just like, feels like a sense of purpose now. We just moving, rolling with it.
Yeah, it's funny how, us gentlemen of a certain age, right? And you look around and all of a sudden you're kind of one of the OGs. I'll be 40 in May. And it was like, I feel blessed to just have survived to this point, to be perfectly honest. But now I'm able to be an inspiration to a lot of young artists that are coming up. And I'm a songwriter myself and have, raised in a rural environment and fell into a lot of the trappings that befall the urban community, right? I did time for selling weed. I did, 2 years of my life that I gave up to prison and kind of lost myself in a lot of those things, addiction and a lot of that. So, but music is in many ways the thing that, especially now, keeps me out of trouble, right? I mean, I have kids and I'm obviously a lot older and all the stuff that I did time for is getting descheduled and legal to buy from the store. But it really, music has been the one constant in my whole life when everything else has kind of faded away, no matter what it was. I'm a huge supporter of other independent artists. I have my own music career and those things, but I really am passionate about supporting my community, and my community are creators. And I loved that about you. Obviously, we talked to Michelle, and when she told me about you, and I was like, yeah, connect me as soon as possible with this man, because I feel like we are kindred spirits in that realm for sure.
Yeah. No, that's a fact, man. I think it's all about paying it forward. I think there's a big saying. It's like teach what's taught, right? So it's like, if you have some information, like how do you pass that down? And I think honestly, like when one grow, I think we all should be able to grow. And I think the idea is like build something that is kind of a platform that people can participate in and whatever however that may look. And I think that's what we're about here in the kind of the New England creative scene. While there's pockets and whatnot for whether it be for different genres or whatever the case may be. But I think for the most part, like we're all trying to platform it, and just like you guys over there, just trying to put on for our area, our very overlooked area.
Yeah, and I'm a member of the Midwest Country Music Organization. Last year, we were blessed to be voted on by the members as the content creator of the year for that organization. And it meant a lot to me because a lot of the, voting members we're the people that were guests on the show over that period of time, right? So, we kind of juiced up the vote in that. And they said the award wasn't even a thing before that. But as soon as I saw it on, the nomination list, was like, oh, we got a really good shot at this, because there's
Oh,
just not a lot of creators, especially in the podcasting world in, South Dakota and just the Midwest in general. Right. I live in rural South Dakota. My town's 1,000 people. I'm an hour and a half from a town that has over 50,000 people. And, Sioux Falls is, I think, like 200,000, the biggest city in the state. I'm 5.5 hours from Minneapolis, St. Paul, 5.5 hours from Kansas City. So there's not these huge population artistic centers even
yeah,
close. And there's so many creative people in between those spaces. So I really set out with the mission to like be the connector between all of those small places, but then finding a way to connect in the bigger areas. Right. So we got some really nice hubs. We're very, getting more connected in the Nashville scene, obviously kind of coming from a country music world. I'm a lot more of a rock, indie rock kind of guy, but,
yeah,
a thriving rock scene in Nashville as well. I got deep roots in the Chicago area. That's where my family moved to South Dakota from. So still have a lot of love for that city. Minneapolis has become a really huge supporter of what we're doing. And last summer, I got to spend a lot of time in Missouri between Kansas City and St. Louis and building that out. This year, we're taking a big trip to Texas, spending a whole week between Dallas, Austin, Houston, and planning on being, really in the heartbeat of the music and tech art world for South
yeah,
by Southwest for that purpose. Let me
yeah,
go and be who I am in these, where the action is, because I know I'm going to attract people inside of that. And I don't have to be the star of the show to go find a few of my people to start collabing with and to build that out. And that's why when I got introduced to your music and just you as a person and all the things that you were doing, and we're going to talk about Mass Music and Arts Summit as well, because that, we're building creator conferences in the same vein that you guys are doing out there, that like creators need to be educated on what the industry actually is these days, right? Those days of the major record deal and you're going to get signed and somebody's going to come along and change your life. Those are long gone. They've been gone for decades, right? And it's time for, young artists that, think they can go out and to put something out on Spotify and they're all of a sudden going to become some overnight sensation. That doesn't happen. And there's a business education that you need in that part.
yeah, yeah. I think that's extremely important to note. I think what like that was even an emphasis for the last iteration of the Mass Music and Arts Summit this past year when we held it at the ALOF. There's this big like emphasis on institutional knowledge and like what it's like to be a part of systems and learn what it's like to work within these different corporations and kind of like navigate and like how do you be a champion for your artists outside of like maybe the direct on the ground team. I think it's important because a lot of time you don't get that information, like right, that's like inside information. You're doing an internship for however many years before you get maybe a contract to be on position for something, and you're working a part of a creative team. But for the most part, a lot of people in our market are freelancing, and for those who are kind of working with the major corporations, they've kind of like how they say moved on up, or kind of like moved out of Massachusetts or moved out of the New England area, went to the West Coast, or whether it be kind of went down to Atlanta. So I think it's just important to bring, like you said, bring resources here to where people can kind of like really, really connect with information that they might not have access to on a day to day. And then definitely be in a room with people that they're just not going to always be in proximity with. That's what like, co-founder of BTOG, who is also like the very instrumental because he is kind of like pioneering the summit with like it being a brainchild of his, and we just kind of materialized it and bring it to life over the last couple of years. But really connecting young people, because him being an artist himself, understanding that grind, like you mentioned, it's kind of like it's tough, and he doesn't feel the need to always be the point person. Similar for myself, it's like you don't always got to be the guy. Sometimes it's just about connecting the dots, and that's what that is kind of it's our industry expo. That's what it is in the simplest form. I think it's growing. It's beautiful. Like super excited about it. Super excited about this year. But I think we get the opportunity not only to bring great talent here from the industry, but like platform great talent that's already here. And we kind of have this like independent market thing going on in Massachusetts right now. That's a little swag. So it's like I feel like a lot of gratitude to be behind like one of the forces behind like pushing that and like kind of helping change the landscape out here musically when it comes to like the economic component too, because you mentioned that being able to build a career outside of waiting for a major label to come around and drop a contract on your front door. So nah, I
Yeah,
feel
it's
that.
just it's not happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you've already built up and beyond just like followers and some metrics, like you have to have your business tight before people really want to invest in you anymore, right? There's been so much money lost on artists that are just going to turn around and blow it and waste the investment in them, that they're just not big risk takers, right? The major labels and even a lot of the independent labels, they just don't have the, with no record sales, right? Which always kind of leverage that. Like, you know what, we could deal with you being, a little bit of, maybe just being hard to work with, or being, someone who doesn't have their business game tight. If you could sell records still, you're willing to deal with it, right?
Yeah,
Well, now with streaming stealing all the money from that record industry, and it
yeah.
not being what it is, that you really have very little wiggle room in that. You better have your game super tight because the margins are slimmer than they've ever been.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's important to know. I think you just in general, right? You want to be educated. This is something you want to be a professional in. I think there's the aspects of the art, the business, everything associated that you kind of just you have to learn or just be abreast of, be like, just be up on game to certain things. And then if that's not necessarily your expertise or within your bandwidth to kind of handle and manage, build a team around yourself and be intentional about that. But I think we also that's the more nuanced part of the game that you learn. I think you get that at the summit as well, like how to build a team, how to network, and really Issa Rae has this thing, this great quote where she kind of just talked about like the process of networking and building and like really seeing value in your peers and understanding that you have a network laterally opposed to like maybe chasing someone who's working on a different level and whatnot, but more so working with the peers that you already had to get to that level. And I think sometimes, just in the pursuit of whatever it is that you're working on, you can kind of lose sight of that. So it's important to kind of just like emphasize community, which I think is another aspect of what we've been talking about. But with these things, these systems that we're trying to build, and it's at its core, that's what they are really. It's just like these community building opportunities and spaces and experiences for artists. And that's important, especially when we're in these small markets, right? Like I know you mentioned 1,000 people, but it's like here, it's like it's obviously a metropolitan city, but we still got like the feelings of that very like when it comes to the music scene in particular, it can feel very, very microscopic. So like I totally get that and understand.
Yeah, well, and Boston's not, one of your top, it might be top 10, but
Oh,
it's not one of your top 5 markets, right? For
oh,
music.
at all. And it's like it's something that we've been trying to change that narrative. There's actually a Globe article from one of our great journalists out here, Vicky, that she just talked about the scene not really needing anything but a rebrand. Like I think there's this misconception that there isn't music, there isn't entertainment out here, but I think that's honestly farthest from the truth. There's a lot of opportunity here for dope stuff to happen. There's just a lot of great arts and culture to begin with, and I think there is a lot of great entertainment and music that comes out of the Boston and in the Massachusetts and the New England area, just for the most part. But I think it's kind of untapped in a sense, like it isn't how it's covered. We don't get the opportunity at coverage as much as
You're almost
opposed.
too close to New York, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it's just like, how things are covered here. But I think, as much as people want to talk about the grind and putting in the work and putting out music, the promotion and the conversation and the publicity, for lack of a better term, really, around what's happening in the scene and in the area has to be just as driving as the energy behind the creators and the people making music. I don't think we really have like platforms like yourself where there are individuals who are kind of like helping communicate this message outward and kind of like helping build in an online digital space to kind of be parallel with this whole streaming society that we're living in. We all know that we're in a digital space now. but they're very few. Now there are a lot more platforms than what existed. Boston's an interesting place. It was where we had like a 2012 kind of 2016 run of a few artists who were able to take off and have some stuff going. Like one of our most notable, Cousin Stiz, like just bro just dropped swag for a year straight, and then ascended and has kind of been doing his thing ever since. And obviously we have guys like Jordan Lucas. It's kind of like out West Mass and coming from the Worcester area, but like there's been a gap in kind of like the idea of there being any type of vibrancy here in the city of Austin. I think what's been blank slated is a lot of other media, which you might be familiar with or you may not be, but the news that comes out of Boston very rarely is about, music, arts, or any type of culture that makes sense for the most part. So we just over the last couple of years been trying to change that, and then obviously having an expo helps, right? Like
Yeah.
that
Well,
always helps. You have a
and
big
well, in
music conference.
that space that you're in today, and shout out the space that you're using today, and give them some play, because I think that's a big start to that, because you live in an urban area that not everyone can afford to build a studio. They don't have the space to build a studio. You may be living with 3 generations in a single flat, and like it just doesn't lend itself to that. So like the creator spaces like you're in today are the important like cornerstones of that. So go ahead and give them a shout out and tell us a little bit more about the
Exactly.
building you're in.
Exactly. I'm glad you kind of brought that up. Because right now we're at BTR Studios, and their creative youth development organization that's kind of been helping youth over the last couple of years, and not just on the creative side, but there's a human development component to it as well. They do mental health and wellness, just a lot of mental health and wellness programming, bringing different clinicians in. They have a marathon Mondays where they kind of sit and they do exercises within that kind of space, and like really talk through experiences with a lot of the youth. And I think that's just important to note that there's a, like you mentioned, there's a hub in areas where a lot of times people may not have access or direct access to studio space and professional studio space like that. Like they're offering quality recording space to come and get your music record, mixed, mastered, work on other creative projects, and just be in community as well. I think that's a big thing too. Just like even when there isn't much, as long as you have some community, I think that goes a long way, because people are able to work and collaborate and build, and then that's how things do come into fruition. So BTO is trying to grow and kind of continue to grow their program out. Being with the summit, and they have a showcase that they do where they kind of like bring artists that have gone through their program. They give them the opportunity to perform at the end of each summer. So I think that's really dope. That's something that hasn't existed. It's kind of like this program that offers label services to young artists before they get to the point where they would even need to be on their own. And I think right there in that is really revolutionary, especially in an area where we're at. So, like while there might be a lot of studios, there's different places to go to, but a lot of things are not super affordable. And when you think about the economics, think about the day and the age we're living in right now, a lot of people, especially for young creatives coming up, things that are definitely not accessible. So having a place like BTO is extremely important, and I think it just does a lot for the community. And there's also that Nipsey Hussle message to where it's just like every human act is to inspire. So it's like I think that's kind of the emphasis and the inception really of this organization and why they came together. And so I think that in itself is just like really important. Started in 2019, and here we are in 2026, two expos in, a bunch of showcases, a bunch of programming, a bunch of youth serve. I think that's just like it's honestly mind blowing, because when I was coming up, I'm only 28 now, but when I was coming up, I didn't have this, especially like in the area that I grew up in. It's like it's in the area that I grew up in, so it's like even mind blowing every time I step in the space. It's like still mind blowing. Like I never am not enthused about walking into the studio, because it's like it literally, when I tell you, but it literally did not exist. And it's just like, yo, this is crazy every time. And then of course there's this great mural that I get to always look at too. You feel me? Big Nip. So that's always beautiful.
There's I mean, so much of what you're talking about, it just hits right to the essence of why I started this podcast, to bring people in, everything we've hit on: networking, mentorship, just a creative space, right? It's all
Yeah.
part of community. And it's why it's right under you on the stage right now, right? It was such a big part to me at the inception of the Scene projects that it was not just about the media and the podcast. It was about the community that we were growing. And now we
Yeah.
have the Midwest Original Music Organization that has over 900 members on Facebook. We have, the Scene
Wow.
Projects group on Facebook, which is more of an open, like, just share your art kind of page, right? That has over 1,600 members. And this is all stuff that I've started within the last 2 years. Like the Scene projects
Yep.
didn't exist 24 months ago. I was
Yeah.
just started. I thought I was quitting my welding job to go be a rock star, HAAWWS. I was like, oh, I got the gigs booked. I'm going out to do it. And we're very fortunate out here to, even without ticketed shows, we get pretty good guarantees. So I was going out, and obviously the cost of living in rural America, much different than, our metropolitan areas, that, I was like, well, man, I can pay my rent and make almost as much money playing music 4 nights a week as I can, working at this job where it's just
Yeah.
sucking the life out of me. So I'm going to go do that. And then over that course of the time was just like, I don't have it in me to be about me that much to do this forever. Right? Like, I'm not selfish enough to go be that star and to only do this. And in the meantime, I had kind of started the podcast, my first real exposure to it. I had done a few interviews on my phone. I had a piece of equipment called a Zoom P4, could plug the XLRs into the back of it, and I could plug my phone in the side. So just calling all my friends, right? I already had the broadcast mic because of my music studio. And
Yeah.
I had done a few when I'm promoting my new track of, being on a few other my friends' podcasts. And I was like, oh, I have that. Oh, I
Okay.
have
Right.
that. Like, I have a podcast studio at home, don't I? And they're like, yeah, you definitely do. Just hit record and go. So I just started. And one of our first big moments was going to the Midwest Country Music Organization award show. New member had just joined in like January or February. The award show was in April. And as I was packing up to leave, I was like, well, I'm going to bring these microphones in this little unit, and I'm going to figure out how to do some interviews. So I camped out at grabbed a table at jam night the night before the show where everybody's just kind of hanging out, and ran interviews. Did 25 interviews that night, just running people through in a couple hours. And it was like, oh, this is born now. So I woke up in the morning, got on the laptop. I cut up all the, they were all kind of shortest episodes, 5-10 minute interviews. So
Yeah.
I made a batch of them, and I put them immediately onto my website. And I had previously, I call them tags, but I had made up a bunch of little QR code like business cards. I can print 10 of these on a sheet of paper. I laminated it myself, so it had a little bit of, play to it. And I had like 300 with me. I put one on every seat in the theater the next day. And that was kind of the launch of the Scene projects. And, you fast forward a year from that point, and we get to bring home a little bit of hardware, right? And we get we get rewarded and kind of recognized for that effort. And then, fast forward to this year, we finally took it onto video. I did 100 episodes my first 9 months, right? I wasn't scared of just doing them and releasing them. Nobody was listening anyway, right? There was no point in me taking 2 years of doing an episode a week to get to 100 episodes so that other podcasters would actually take me seriously, right? That like 100 number was a huge milestone for everyone. Yeah. Like, you're not a real podcaster until you have 100 episodes. And I was like, cool. Well, I'm going to get there as fast as I humanly can. And then this year we had 1,500 uploads on our YouTube channel, over 350,000 views on our material. Not a lot in the long form side yet, but generating 1,000 views a piece on the short form content. And once I realized that, like, well, that's where our juice is. Well, cool. Well, then we're going to put out 10 to 15 shorts a week and just drive content and put it out there. If that's what the algorithm's going to accept, that's what we're going to do. And now, you talked about your guys' summit. We're doing creator conventions is what we're calling them, or creator conferences. And that's part of our national tour, is not just going out and performing and doing showcases to record for the podcast and on our fast streaming networks and YouTube channels and all of that, but to also sit down with creators, bring our industry experts. I mean, I myself have the authority now to call myself an expert, the same as you would. You know, Brad Stewart, the founder of Music Mogul AI, coming out on the road with us, and some other people, to just sit and do a panel and to share our experience with everyone, and to have people get to glean some of that knowledge from us. And to
Yeah,
do that as much as possible this year is the goal. And then to have all of that to release out into the world on the YouTube channels and everything as well, because exactly what you said, the education of this next generation is so important. And you're a lot younger than me. You know, you're a very mature young man who's had a lot of life experience, and that experience inside of this industry specifically, to be able to educate kids that are, you know, 15 to 25, and to help them come up and to learn and to be able to grow and hopefully surpass you when they're 22, right? Like, get past me. That's what I want. Go, you know, go
yeah.
and do more, do better.
Yeah, and you're seeing that a lot with initiative, and you're seeing that a lot with energy. I think like you even mentioned it, get into that 100, you're just gonna take the initiative and get going instead of waiting and whatnot. I think that's what I'm also seeing a lot from the younger generation now. It's just like their initiatives to just get out and go and organize and make sure that they have things going, whether it be their shows, how they promote their projects and their media. Like it's just very much of a like an attitude of and the audacity, and I think that's what's important because that's what you have to have. And I know a lot of time they talk about for artistry, you got to like live in this idea of like delusion almost like to the point it's like the brink of insanity. But I think it's more of an audacity that you have to have with your creativity and the consistency for it. You got to really just like you mentioned, just like diving in, going. I have this thing called signaling. It's just like so it's just like I'm dialed in. So it's just like a focus of like you're just hitting a specific point and you're focusing on these things and just like like it's a concept I pulled from somewhere. I can't remember off the top of my head, but like I think it's just like sometimes a great philosophy to have because it's just like this focus, this like insatiable focus that you have to get what it is that you're trying to do done, and that whatever the case may be in whatever field. And I feel like you can apply that to any part of life, and I think that's the important thing too. Is what I'm seeing about like a lot from the younger generation is their ability to utilize their transferable skills. I think that's like something that I've really been noticing, and I was like, "Yeah, that's cool." You just see something about your younger cousin, it's just like, okay, like yeah, that's cool. It's like oh, that's dope. They're picking up like a lot earlier on things, and I think that's just in the way the world is now. And I think so. There's because you always say that like sometimes kids grow up a little too fast, but I think in the way the world is now, you can't necessarily be you can be a little bit too grown, depending on the situation. But I think it is good when you just know there's like you can tell certain young people just have a certain amount of social awareness. Because I think that like at the basis, that's really important for this industry as well, right? Because the community, like what like it like while it's an industry, within that industry is a community, and you want to be able to build and like scale it by being able to create great relationships with people because that's what it's about. Like, right, we now building on this relationship we have through Mish kind of connecting us. And that's the important. I know about what you have going on there. You have to know about a little bit more what we have going on here. Maybe there's an opportunity to connect further and build those bridges as you're talking about taking things on tour. I think that panel concept into a tour fashion as a component is just like a great concept overall because the shows are looking to be more dynamic. I don't know if you're familiar with the artist LaRussell, who's been doing this thing online now, super popular, but like he's even taking his shows to the next level, incorporating different things. I'm seeing a lot of independent artists really do that, and just artists in general, time like even some of the major acts trying to take some experimental leaps on the things that they do, whether it be in their live performance experiences or just like rollouts and whatnot, and kind of going against the traditional norms because most like major acts they have their performances are really kind of limited to like a meet and greet and just them performing. But like, what is the idea to like do more and like build that out in this new day and age where you don't have to be one way? There isn't a one way. Like while they've always said that, we've always said there's no one way for an artist's journey. It's like once you get there, just like they make it as like these specific ways in which you kind of have to show up. And I think that's not the day and age that we live in now. And I think that's also dope too, because there's a younger generation that gets to participate in that. They get that opportunity. That's something that didn't exist maybe when we were coming up. That's
No,
always
yeah, and because of podcasts, you feel like artists more, right? Because a lot of artists, and especially bigger ones, I suggest every artist in our world that they should have their own podcast because people want to feel like they know you. Like that's always been the allure of rock stars or pop stars, is that like people through your music feel like they know a little piece of you. But now, because we've kind of had that experience, right? I think the 90s, the pop stars of the 90s and early 2000s, boy bands and stuff, it kind of like killed that. And now that you have this massive industry of podcasting, that people want more. They want to know all the details of your life, and to kind of see the person behind the star. And we can probably thank Taylor Swift for that, honestly, in a lot of ways, right? Who has just peeled back the layers of her life and have let her fans in, that now there's the expectation of that. So to like
Yeah.
think that you're just going to be some artist and go out, deliver a show, and to be someone else behind the like behind the scenes, like, no, if you're not letting people behind the scenes, they probably ain't following you on the stage. Like it's less about your music now than it has ever been, and it is more about you as a person, and who you are as an artist because of that life experience. And the more you can share that, the better off you're going to be. And I feel like this podcast is actually going to make my music more popular. You know, you heard the intro music off the
Yeah.
top, like that's my song, right? Like that's a way that I'm working my music into the public diaspora without you even knowing that it's me, right? It kind of cuts out before the lyrics come in and you don't realize it, but you are driving that 25 seconds of that song in. So when it does, you do start to hear it out in the world, because I can fund some ads and to put, you know, that song in front of more people that you already know it. You don't know why you know it, but you
Yeah.
do. And that's where I'm always encouraging artists, like you got to have some kind of weekly content. It doesn't have to be an interview podcast. It can just be you. You know, Alexandra Kay really blew up because of her coffee and country. And all she was doing
Yeah.
was showing up, making her iced coffee in the morning and singing a different country cover. And before you know it, Randy Travis is appearing with her on there. And then, you know, a year later after that, she's on tour with frickin' Jelly Roll. And now she's going out on her own and selling out theaters and doing all of those things. Like, it can happen for you, but you have to be in front of people on a consistent basis. Like you can't show up once a month with a new single and expect people to care. It's false. It's like a false reality that we're living in, to think people are going to care. Like if you're not showing up to support them and being a part of their daily life, why are they going to show up for you? You're not that cool, right?
Yeah, yeah. Nah, you put it perfectly. I think this is the year 2026 and beyond is the year. Starting this year, should have started last year, should have started years ago, but definitely in 2026 and beyond, just a real big emphasis on consistency. I think it's something cliche that we say, but to your point, gotta consistently be in people's faces. However you're in people's faces, I know we're in a content age, and like you mentioned, having a podcast. I think artists, to your point, should create their own platforms, right? You know, we're seeing the streaming era and the streaming kind of I would say space become more popular, and artists kind of figure out and navigating that space, whether it's they're partnering up with already existing streamers or starting their own streams as a way to kind of connect with their fans on a day-to-day. But I think of someone who's been connecting with their fans in the same way, like shout out to the Swifties, but I think of like a Wiz Khalifa who has like a
Yeah,
day-to-day
Wiz, massive.
that like he's been always doing. And the Russell is kind of like who's even kind of shouted Wiz out for the inspiration on that. But recently when they had linked up, I had saw that online that kind of a clip went a little viral of the Russell just kind of explaining the experience of why he creates his like day-to-day content, where on his channel like he's always doing, whether it be walks or just like his homie Splash kind of just following him around, and they're doing the behind the scenes vlogs, and they're releasing those on a daily. And I think it's important because, to your point, it's more about personality than it is about music. That's why someone like Cardi B is so dope, because Cardi gives you gives you that personality that just like, even though she's not always, she started off in a lot of media, like, always, whether it be blogs and stuff like that. So he was inundated by her just because her personality was always going viral. But then I think over a period of time, it allowed her to step back and then just continue to still have these moments because she knows how to be herself when she does show up. And so I think it's just important to know that, like, people are people at the end of the day, and we want to know that we can connect with another person, like outside of the things that you may be offering. And so it's like when you can get a little bit more of a person, whether that be through an interview or they're doing their own kind of content on their own platform, I think you just letting your audience in a little bit more. But I do think it's probably a tough space for artists. I know even for someone like myself starting off, it was something I had to figure out and navigate. And I know that for others it might be something that's just like a little hump that may be tough to get over, just figuring out like what it looks like for you. Because you definitely want to do it within your, your niche and what your creativity kind of like, communicates, like whatever it is that you're trying to communicate with your art, whether that be at the time for a specific project or just your overall brand and image. You want to make sure that it's in alignment. Because this day and age, you can unfortunately misrepresent yourself as well, just because we're in a content age and people clip things up and all this other stuff. So just like having just giving that thought as well and making sure that you're moving diligently and just moving. Most importantly, just like you're on point, just with like when you're building out your content sphere or your platforms or whatnot, and it's manageable. Because that's another thing. Like you kept it going, but there's a lot of people who kind of built out platforms and then like they kind of just went dull. And it's always crazy to me. I'll still see the page up for something, and it was just like, damn, that was a great platform, and it's like, damn, they just stopped creating content, and it's like, that was really helpful. And it's like, and that's happened a lot out here in this market, unfortunately. And that's kind of why we've had a lot of, like, again, we mentioned consistency earlier, but it's like we've had a lot of stop and goes, like stop and goes. Like we'll have some momentum here as a scene, and then it'll stop, and then we'll have some momentum again, and then from 2020 and really 2022, we've been having just straight momentum, and we kind of feel like this brink of a renaissance. So we just trying to lean into that and stay creatively inclined, and just continue to swag.
Well,
Continue
I
to
think
swag.
sometimes what happens is that that momentum is just created by like one person or one crew, and it's
Yeah,
not as a community as a whole, right? So that when that
yeah,
one person or crew makes it and they move away to a bigger market, because it just happens, right? Like we had one of our biggest artists, shout out to Denim from South Dakota, but he just moved to Nashville, and like that hurts our scene, right? In total, because he was pushing, but he had outgrown it, right? Like
yeah,
what can you
yeah.
do for the man when he's bigger than everybody else? He's the only artist in South Dakota with tens of thousands of Spotify listeners every month, and he's pushing harder than anyone. Like, brother, we're proud of you, man. But yeah, you're
Yeah,
gonna outgrow some scenes, but that's why community is so important. That like, so then that
exactly.
scene doesn't die. And
Exactly.
that's how we landed on the name of the show, because everyone I was talking to, I was like, I'm thinking about starting this thing up, and you're like, oh, that's great that you're doing that. Yeah, because we got tons of great players, lots of great musicians, but there's no scene. There's no scene, right? And I was like, well, you know what? There is now. And it's the Scene Projects. And it is and that's why it's always been the projects, because it's been, not just a shout out to kind of like the old housing projects, right? And the community that those, become, granted, not always great because of what they were, but it was always a much larger idea than just a single thing. Right. It was leaving the room for growth inside of that. We have 4 networks underneath this umbrella now, right? We got a sports network, and a shout out to one of the greatest sports cities in the world, Boston, Mass, man. Come on. Do you feel, and
City
man,
of
come on,
champs.
man. How many freaking champions? Do you feel like the sports culture there, because it is so great, that it kind of overshadows the music culture a little bit, and that like it doesn't necessarily always leave room for growth? Or do you feel like they could be more intertwined? I mean, the Celtics, the Patriot, like the freaking Bruins, like you got so many championship teams in the
Yeah.
last few decades. Do you feel like the sports culture kind of hinders the music, where there could be more growth between the two?
You know what, Bubba? I do. I think in a way it's been merging really well. Now we just have the Celtics. I don't know if you like on social media you follow or see just if it happens to come across your timeline. When JB might be crossing somebody over, but the just are even creative down to the creative teams at the organization for some of the different professional teams we have. Just again, so they're just getting so crazy with the content. That's how just like sports wise, we're in a great space. Like you mentioned, we always have been, but I think now they're doing a better like a job of like either whether it's young people being in the building and working behind the scenes, so they're just tapped in with what's cool and what's culture, like what's trendy, from like down to the edits on the content, from the type of interviews, like, what the artists and athletes are doing. Like we have this big, fashion is a big part of sports now, and what athletes are wearing, how they're showing up in the lifestyle component. So I think for entertainment here in the New England area, that's what we really had. We've had sports, like, as for if we're doing talking anything entertainment, it'd be sports. So you're looking at our athletes, and those are like our biggest celebrities when it comes to Massachusetts. But I think they're also doing their job about getting in community and highlighting things that are dope, because you have local celebrities everywhere. Every community has their local celebrity, where it's like, those people on the ground in community that a lot of people know, and that whether they have a lot of great relationships, or they do a lot of great organizing, or they, give a lot to the community, or, they're that, they can be just that go-to person. You can be that elder in the community that just everyone goes to as well. So it's like, I think they do a great job, especially between all of the Celtics players, most of the entire program. Honestly, the staff over there, even Joe Mazzulla has been in community, kind of just like really getting on the ground with folks, and like showing that they're here, that they're personable, they're human beings as well. Obviously they're put on this very high pedestal, excuse me, but for the most part, they're just like us, and they want to be able to showcase that. JB has come through the studio before. He's a really dope dude. He's even hopped in the music space too. So it's how, it's kind of like that era where you had certain like Shaquille O'Neal trying to make music, like not trying to, like really making albums. Like Shaq put out albums and stuff like that.
And
From what I
now, shout out to the man while you're talking about him, that he's, putting a lot of money, putting his money out there to support independent artists. I saw a reel with him talking about a new initiative that he's doing and putting his money out there to support independent artists and to get that out there. So really cool thing to me, like, because it's such a big sport, there shouldn't be a single sports reel that comes out of the city of Boston that doesn't have a Boston artist music behind it. Right. And like, that takes a community initiative where we're like, hey, the creative team's like, look, we ain't putting nothing out there that's supporting any artist that isn't from Boston, right? And it takes that, and I see it, Boston has always been like a fiercely independent area, right? Like,
yeah,
because they're always trying to separate themselves from New York and the rest of, the East Coast,
at least,
especially Philly and all that, and all those that you want to, they've always fought to be that. And I think that that's a cool initiative that hopefully somebody's doing, and maybe you're seeing more of, with athletes dipping into that music space to be like, no, anything with my name on it going out there in the world, it's going to have this list of artists, and then compiling that database of artists and their music, that like, here's the selected music you get to choose from. And there ain't nothing wrong with like building bigger communities on a national level, but also being, having a fierce love for your local community.
Yeah, yeah, and that happens. That happens. There's been a lot of, you see locals, whether it be artists or whether it be influencers, getting a lot of sync placements, or they're just getting a lot of media ops. The Celtics and their halftime, we got a DJ. Shout out to Break One, that does a great job. He does a lot of, like, the music direction, and DJs a lot of the games for the Celtics, and he also works with the Red Sox Association. So he brings a lot of local artists in. Recently, I just saw on Instagram as I was just scrolling that we had an artist, R&B singer, goes by Nolly, is who just did the last halftime performance. We had many artists of various genres do the halftime performance before. So I think the Celtics have been doing a great job, and their entertainment team has been doing an incredible job about, like, making and connecting those dots. Red Sox always have, or the Fenway is always having someone there, and I think that's dope. And I think we are seeing a little bit more, whether they're picking people up for voiceovers and trying to use local filmmakers and cinematographers to bring things to life. I think the people behind the scenes are doing a great job. We're just getting more hometown. A lot of times we'll have a lot of transplants. I think this Massachusetts is good for that as well, just like having a lot of people coming from different places, whether it be for work opportunities or school. And so they're also, like, you come in the space of the creative field and working at a lot of these different agencies, and on some of these teams. But I think they're also doing a good job of just about tapping in locally, whether it be come just from, living and staying in Boston over the couple of years, going to school or working or whatever the
Oh, you
case
got
may
one
be.
of the greatest, musical institutes in on the planet in Boston.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, Berkeley's right there, and it's a thing to where it's like, even that, you think about that, right? Where there's like there's this outside perception of like Berkeley and it's great, and it is. And I think what has been happening over the last couple of years, I really want to say after the pandemic, really like maybe 2022, there's been more of this connection between institution and community. Like I think we talked about it earlier. I briefly mentioned like wanting to get institutional knowledge out to these next generation of artists, but just artists who are also like and still in the grind, like people who still need access to that information at every level. Because right, like you mentioned at one point that we're experts, but like there's still people who've been in the business and done and achieved and done deals and all types of crazy stuff that we can learn from. There's always like people you can learn from. So it's just like being able to kind of like build with those people and learn from those people, I think is extremely important. But making those connections when they're local is important as well too. You have, like you mentioned, an institution like Berkeley College of Music. Like, how do we make those connections from institution to some of the organizations like in the community that might be in the music space or directly to artists? And I think Berkeley does a great job. They got a performance venue. It's like a red room, small, but they're like hip hop club and like other like student clubs that do music or music production. Sometimes when they showcase, they'll bring in different local artists. They'll book them to either headline and stuff. I think that's really dope. They do a lot of like open oxes and beat showcases, and they allow like the public to come in and participate. I think that's really the initiative of the students, more so the university or the college itself. But I think it's still a testament, it being allowed to happen is a testament to what the college is looking forward to and probably would love to do, but maybe just not have a lot of internal capacity for it. That's
Yeah.
understandable.
Well, and shout out a couple of South Dakota kids that are there, Rowan Grace and Parker Sunby. I've been blessed to work with both of these young people, and they're out there going to school, and I get to kind of follow along vicariously. I wish I would have been smart enough at a young age. I went to school for, a business degree that I was never going to use. So after like a semester, I was like, yeah, I'm out of here. Where if I would have gone to school for something that actually interests me, which has always been music, I probably would have stuck it out and I could have learned music business and I could have been a lot farther along at 39 than I am. But I feel like, God has put me in this position, to put me through that school of hard knocks. And it was just such a huge shift, right? From 2004 when I graduated high school to 2026 where we're at now. Like a lot has changed in this industry, and I kind of have one foot stuck in that analog world still. It was really hard for me to stay consistent jumping on this thing and doing my lives, but I try to take it out on a walk every day and hit my community and to share a little bit of what's going on in our world every day. But it wasn't easy, right? To be in your late 30s and to not be part of the TikTok generation and all of a sudden like being an influencer. I was already an influencer before I started. Like I was influencing my community before I was ever like online doing it on a consistent basis, if that kind of makes sense. And I feel like a community like Boston lends itself to having a lot of those influential people out there already that necessarily aren't on camera all the time. So it's bridging that gap. Spaces like you're in today, initiatives and the mass music arts, like you guys are doing it. And I can't wait to come out. I need you to shout out the dates for the summit so that I can put it in my calendar and maybe come out and make an appearance with y'all. And then I need your website and where everyone can find you before I let you go.
Yeah. So the summit, happens yearly each fall. It's an annual summit, Mass Music and Art Summit. So you can be looking for the date will probably be coming pretty soon, but we're aiming probably between the October and November for the summit this year. So just be on the lookout for that. But you can go to massmusicandartsummit.com to check that out. Or you can go to Beat the Odds, btoboston.org to check out Beat the Odds if you want to read up on them and the great work that they do in the community. For myself, HAAWWS, that's HAAWWS on all platforms. You can find me anywhere you got Wi-Fi or cellular service. I'm on there. I'm on there.
Yeah, you got some great stuff, man. Really enjoyed the music video I got to listen to and to watch. Love the artistry. Love everything that you're doing. Even more than the music, I love who you are in your community, how passionate you are about those things, because that's what drives culture, right? And what the big guys are doing with the major sports teams platforming Boston, all of them around the country, starting to platform more local artists in all of their locations. The downstream effect is more art in your community, right? It inspires young kids that are at the game for their first time and be like, wait, man, like that he's from our neighborhood, right? Like, and
Exactly.
now he's down there like that. The downstream effects of that are so incredible to a community. And I'm just so proud of you and your whole crew doing what you're doing, man. It's incredible. I will be there. I'll be keeping an eye out for dates. I'm going to do everything in my power to come out and be a part of that. We should be on a run for another tour there. I've never done New England in the fall, so maybe I'll be making a swing out on tour, and we're able to bring our two communities together and to do some of our showcases and do our content as part of what y'all are doing, and really bring our communities together that way. I think it'd be an incredible experience.
Yeah, that sounds like swag, man. Mitch put it together. So, it's nothing to get it together and keep it going. But like, nah, I appreciate the kind words, man. This was a great conversation. And I think you kind of hit it right on the nail with that. It's like big on community building and connecting the bridge, whether that be across the coast or, across the pond or across the street, man. And I think that's what we're just trying to do, man. Just kind of continue to build this global music community. But that's what music does. It brings people together at the end of the day, right?
100%, 100%. HAAWWS, thanks for taking some time for me today, brother, and thanks for being part of the scene.
Of course, this is beautiful.